Welcome back to Elevating Stories of Climate Equity. Today we have the chance to learn more about the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, also known as CEJA. We'll talk about the influence this bill has on our community, economy, and social equity at large. We'll also connect you with resources to learn more about how this bill impacts you. We'll hear from Ann Evans, CEO at Elevate, Delmar Gillis, COO, Elevate, Yami Newell, Associate Director, Community Projects on my team at Elevate, and Angela Morrison, our special guest, Policy Engagement Manager at the Chicago Jobs Council. We're going to break down what's happening and what it means for you. First up, we'll talk to Ann Evans. Hey, Ann.
Hey.
I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm so thrilled to be with you today.
This is pretty exciting, and you played a background part in this bill in terms of being the COO of the organization where Delmar and McKibben, our policy director, well, a bunch of us have worked on CEJA. But before we get to that, let's talk to you as CEO. I'm so glad that you're here. There's a ton of things I want to ask you. Full disclosure, old friends, and my CEO. So it's all that. And we matched and we didn't even plan it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And talk about your job. I'd love to know, what does a CEO do? And in this time when we're more aware of needing diverse leaders, you're a woman leader. Talk about your work.
Yeah, I'm CEO at Elevate, and our work, as you know, is about advancing climate and racial justice. And in order to do that, we need a hugely diverse team. I am so proud to lead a team of talented, diverse professionals and people in the community to be doing things like installing clean energy projects across the community, to be training businesses of color to get this work so that they can grow their wealth. And this is really inspirational to me because the people are what are making the change. And as we continue to work with youth and they demand faster and faster change, that's what's going to get us where we need to go.
I like that. And you're very modest because you're our CEO, you're a PhD, you really run things, and you've also learned how to get out of the way and let other people do their work. What's your biggest lesson as a CEO? If you were encouraging a young Ann or Andy or, gender neutral in the audience, what would you say to them?
Don't be afraid to get out of the way. Look at your team, see their assets, give them opportunities to lead. And yes, they may fail, but they will also soar. And so learn from others. I have a huge network of other leaders that have taught me. To this day, I continue to have mentors. And I just want to say, I will be in your corner when you need somebody.
I love that. Now, you've had a window seat on the passing of CEJA. How do you feel about the role that so many people at Elevate had as part of this outstanding coalition? In fact, this show started in partnership with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition and in conversation with all of our partners. But how does it feel to have watched them work to find success?
It's been super exciting. I have to say that the work of advancing climate and racial injustice is a huge undertaking. We need a really big table. We need everyone to have a seat at the table. And so watching our policy team under the leadership of Ann McKibben, Pastor Vance, and many others, hearing the stories that our work help tell, and that's what advances policy. Real things that impact real people are what really moves the needle with policy leaders. I am so proud that Delmar Gillis, our Chief Operating Officer, was asked to be on the negotiating team. It's a historic moment when the first African-American man in Illinois is in leadership on an environmental bill. That is huge. It has been wonderful to watch him lead. He has the skills, he has the persistence, he has the deep commitment to equity and the people across Illinois that led the way years ago when we started with Listen, Lead, Share.
And I know that you're a little bit modest as well. I just want to go back and make opportunity to hear, like, what's your typical day? Like, what does a CEO, a chief executive officer, do? And I know at Elevate could be very different because our COO negotiates equity and energy bills, but what do you do?
I have the pleasure of leading a really fantastic, diverse team. I set strategy for the organization. I build strategic partnerships. I work with our funders because the funding is needed to really amplify the work. So my day is hugely diverse and exciting. It's anything from helping a project lead solve a problem to onboarding a new funder, and working with our board to really set strategy for the organization.
Yeah, and I will say outstanding board. One of the things that it would be a shame not to touch on is what you learned about making space for Delmar to go off and do this work. There are folks who policy is in their job description, but you seem to allow folks to do what they can do well, and even if it's not something that you would find in their title. How would you encourage other leaders to take advantage of that? Are there benefits?
Absolutely, and I'll start by telling you the story of how Delmar rose to this level. I believe really strongly that everyone needs to work at the intersection of their passion and their skill set, and that means so many different things for so many different people. So several years ago, when I was slotted to testify in Springfield on one of the earlier energy bills, I looked around and I said, who else can do this? I know I can do it. I've already learned, but who else can do it? And who else can carry a strong, deep message? And I went around the corner because Delmar's offices and mine are right next to each other. I stuck my head in his office and I said, Delmar, are you ready to go testify in Springfield? And he was up for the challenge. And throughout this time, his strong leadership, his ability to build relationships is really important. And I always say that, our work at Elevate is really strong. It's not just about me, it's about the team. And honestly, I think it's a mistake for CEOs to try to take the spotlight all the time. It's in fact a limitation. When you see the full breadth of the team at Elevate, which we will tonight in tonight's exciting show, that's when you see the real power of the organization.
Well, that is outstanding. That is something for other leaders to take at heart. What excites you most about the future and, from the perspective of this bill, but also I'd love to hear from you some of the national things, anything that's not embargoed that you feel that you can share.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time in Illinois. It's an exciting time in the U.S. There is a deep commitment to climate and racial justice that's just growing. Earlier I mentioned how exciting it is to have our younger emerging leaders really demand change. And that to me is so inspiring, and that's what's going to get us where we need to go. So at the federal level, there's the infrastructure package. It's passed. That's exciting. There's a lot in there. It is over $1 trillion. Talking in trillions of dollars is still a little new for me. And Congress is hard at work negotiating the climate and social equity bill that will be coming hopefully before Thanksgiving. So with that, there's a new commitment from the Biden-Harris administration called the Justice 40 commitment. And I know we've talked about that before, but there's a commitment that 40% of the investment from the federal government on climate will go to communities that need it most. When you add onto that the great opportunities with CEJA, I feel like we are now finally at a place where we can make real substantive institutional change.
Well, that is a perfect setup for the rest of our show, because we've heard about it at the federal level, the state level, and we're going to talk about what it can mean for you at a community level as well. Thank you for coming on, my first guest in studio. We're making progress here, and we'll have you back. And we are going to keep our show going, saying a big thanks to Ann Evans. And coming up next, this is our CEJA video. Take a look.
Together we are making history today, taking a giant leap forward. With economic growth and jobs woven into its fabric, this new law is the most significant step Illinois has taken in a generation toward a reliable, renewable, affordable, and clean energy future.
I am so very grateful for my colleagues, the advocates, the community activists, the youth leaders, the faith leaders, for your work to make today happen. And I want to thank Governor Pritzker for making decarbonization a priority from day one.
The Climate and Equitable Jobs Act prioritizes Black and Brown communities that have been disproportionately impacted and historically suffered due to the exposure to toxic pollution. CEJA creates a clean energy economy in Illinois, decarbonizes the electric sector by 2045, prioritizing the retirement of coal and gas plants in environmental justice communities. This work helps ensures that Black and Brown sisters and brothers everywhere are empowered to own their own future. Today, we celebrate our independence from fossil fuels.
All of these community leaders were critical in developing the equity provisions in this bill. These are the people that I fought for in Springfield, and this is why the Climate and Equity Jobs Act is the most equitable clean energy bill in the nation. So let's get to work. There is much to do.
I hope you enjoyed that Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition video. We loved it so much, we wanted to make sure that you got to see it. Now, coming up next is a conversation with actually two old friends of our baby show. You're watching Elevating Stories of Climate Equity from Elevate, and I'm Sylvia Ewing, your host. I'm joined now by Delmar Gillis. You heard us refer to him. He's the COO of Elevate, and that's the Chief Operating Officer, and Yami Newell, Associate Director, Community Projects at Elevate. Hey, thanks you guys for joining us.
Hey, Sylvia. Hey, Delmar.
Hey, Sylvia. Great to be on.
Glad to have you here, and glad to have you here to talk about a success. Just setting the stage, we had conversations before about your work with the community resource team, Yami, and Delmar, about what could happen when this bill passed and why it was important. And ta-da, it is here. So how did it come to pass? What was your role, and how did we get where we are?
Thanks again, Sylvia. It's great to be on. And my role in the process was I was one of three lead negotiators on CEJA. And my primary role was really to focus on the equity provisions and to represent the community at the table in the room. So this was really the first time that the community actually had some representation at the table in the room to negotiate the provisions of the bill. So basically how it happened was community leaders, environmental advocates, and other members of the community brought forward great ideas. And as I mentioned at the bill signing, we took those great ideas and incorporated them into the bill, and then worked with the governor, the legislators, and other community leaders to make it happen.
I love it, though. You were in the room, not sitting outside the door. Coming to you, Yami, how does CEJA affect your team and your work overall?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sylvia. Just a recap for folks, I lead the community resources team at Elevate, and we are deeply engaged in grassroots energy education across the state of Illinois, talking to folks about their concerns, about their hopes and their dreams, as well as about their current challenges today. and helping them better navigate the options available to them locally. And so as a result of CEJA, we'll get to dive deeper into that work. It means we'll actually get to address many of the concerns that we've been hearing over the years for quite some time as we've been doing this work. But more importantly, I'd like to highlight how our work changed the policy process for CEJA. If you've been following this legislation, CEJA used to stand for something else. And so the commitment to equity and climate action is very different. And it was the result of the voices of folks across the state who relentlessly came to the table and said, this is not good enough. This is not what we envision. And so what's different about CEJA is that the stories we've been hearing have been captured and written into legislation with tools for accountability and, most importantly, resources for funding. So we're very excited.
And I know that listen, lead, and share process had a lot to do with informing the work. How the name came about, there might be a few stories about that, but the fact that there was a point when people said no equity, no bill. What was that all about, Delmar?
It was really about a commitment to ensuring equity and that the voices of the community were heard. As Yami said, it was critical to us that there be equity throughout the bill, not just having equity set aside. So whether it was the creation of jobs, whether it was creating incentives, or whether it was the accountability and reporting, if equity was not included in every part of the bill, then we were very comfortable saying this is not good enough. The other thing that happened with CEJA that historically did not happen was that when other areas of the bill were being negotiated, oftentimes other negotiators would want to say focused on decarbonization but not equity, or focus on the nuclear subsidies but not equity. And we were like, no, we're talking about all of this together. Decarbonization has an equity impact. It has a community impact. It has a jobs impact. It impacts communities of color. So we're going to talk about these things collectively. We're going to talk about them together. And we're going to make sure that the perspectives of our community members are being not only heard, but reflected in the outcomes that the bill brought forward. So we were really excited to be able to say that this is the most equitable Jobs Act in the nation. And we're very proud of that fact.
Well, and let's break that down, because words like equity, community, they get used a lot. But I know we've long said that, and it was great to hear the governor and other people talking about this, but the same intractable problems that we've seen in societies, that clean energy solutions could also be a solution there. So give us some numbers and some concrete examples of what this bill will mean for people. And Yami, I'll ask you again to address what you've heard that it will mean for people. So Delmar, give us some numbers. Equity, in what ways and in what numbers?
The first number, Sylvia, I'd like to share with you is $80 million. And $80 million per year for workforce and contractor development.
Woo!
So what that means is a contractor, specifically a Black or brown contractor, now has access to money to basically implement solar in his or her community. And what's really good about CEJA is what it does is it doesn't just pay for the project, but it also pays upfront money. So if a contractor needs to do an upfront assessment or get permits, or needs a truck, or needs work clothes for his or her workers, or needs support, or needs technical training, all of these things are provided through CEJA. The other core component that I really like to highlight is the fact that we're going to have 16 training hubs across the state. And so these hubs are going to be situated in communities that have historically not had access to training. The training programs are going to be able to take folks that have historically not been trained, not been included, and through a 12 to 16 week training program, they're going to be able to get access to real solar jobs with real opportunities. The programs will provide tools, they will provide childcare, they will provide certifications, and they'll provide travel stipends. So the programs were designed listening to the communities, understanding where the barriers were and are, and then basically taking and understanding those barriers and turning a barrier into an opportunity, and then an opportunity into a job, and not just creating a job, but then we want to make sure once someone gets access to a job that they are retained, that they grow, and that they develop. And that, in a nutshell, is what CEJA is going to do for our communities.
Well, I'll say 2 snaps. All that is outstanding. You met the mandate of explaining it and explaining to the audience at home what this means for you. We're all geeked out. This is our work. We think about equity and climate and decarbonization every day. But don't sleep on this if you're just watching at home. It really means something for you. And Yami, let me just reset. Can you explain decarbonization? And yeah, let's just start there. You know, help break that down. What does decarbonization mean? And what is the clean energy that we're talking about?
Sure. So decarbonization is a fancy word of saying that we are moving to non-carbon emission ways of accessing energy. And so what that means here is an increased investment in renewable forms of energy like solar and wind that don't have a negative impact. And so moving our entire housing and building infrastructure to electric sources, including our heat, which is huge for an area like the Midwest, Chicago, and Illinois, where many people still rely on natural gas to heat our homes through extreme winters. And so that's going to mean investment in property. That's going to mean retrofits. That's going to mean making sure that your home is air sealed and insulated, energy efficiency. Many of the topics that we cover on a regular basis on my team. So please join us if you haven't already on social media. We are on Facebook and now on Instagram at Elevate Community Resources, where we host virtual engagement when we're breaking down and really diving deeper into some of these topics. What does it mean to electrify your home? What does it mean to access solar? CEJA makes this accessible for everyone, with a priority for folks who lived in communities on the front line, who've been disproportionately impacted by additional carbon emissions, pollution near power plants, et cetera. And so we're proud of the path forward for this bill. We're excited for the opportunities. We're excited for new pathways for community members to continue to voice their input around developing and designing programs. We've got, green energy banks. This is really exciting and new stuff, and we are ready to unpack it all. So we look forward to talking to folks and hearing folks' questions and input.
I love that. And it's Elevate, I think events is the Instagram. You know how to reach us with our community resource team, our hotline. Our website is elevatenp.org. It's been great to have you on. It's not the last time we'll have you on, but I love connecting the dots that first there was something people should know about that was a possibility. That we invited them to learn more and to see why it should become a reality. And you're back when it is a reality. And I do love what Yami said about new pathways. Delmar, I have, for people to get involved, I have quoted you in the past. I heard you say people should be able to look out their door and see these technologies and things in their community, not just on TV. And Yami, I know that you've been deeply involved in letting people know what's possible for them, not just for someone else. So on our way out, briefly, 30 seconds or so, tell me what you're looking forward to. And Delmar, I'll start with you. What are you excited about in the coming weeks and months?
What I'm really excited about, Sylvia, is that I've already seen a lot of the energy that Yami is talking about. Communities aren't just sitting back and waiting for these programs. They're asking questions, they're engaging in the regulatory process, and they're really starting to identify and prepare for the benefits of CEJA. So my parting comment is please, please, please get engaged. If you want information or more support, you can always reach out to the Elevate team. Also, the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition is going to be intervening in a lot of the upcoming regulatory events and starting to plan for projects. So they are an opportunity, and they can be reached at ilcleanjobs.org.
Thank you. And they're very active on social media as well. Yami, what are you excited about?
In addition to a cleaner future for me and my children, and all of us here in Illinois, I am excited about the additional resources that have been committed by the state, by the governor, really that official seal to address many of the problems that folks in communities on the ground have been talking about for decades. And so I'm excited to roll up our sleeves, to dive deeper, and to form creative solutions. We've gotten this far, and there's a lot more work to do.
Well, I want to thank you both and everyone who made this work possible. It's why the Clean Jobs Coalition received an honor from the United Nations. And Governor Pritzker got to say a few very positive things when he went to the climate summit in Glasgow. Thank you so much, Delmar Gillis. Thank you, Yami Newell. See you next time.
Turning on a light or charging your phone is so simple that you probably don't think about the network of electricity that makes it all work smoothly. This electric grid, made up of a network of power plants and power lines, relied on one-way power delivery technology. The lack of communication resulted in outages that were harder to identify and fix. Today, the grid has undergone a technology evolution, including adding digital communications that give you more choices and ways to save on your electric bill. This is called the smart grid. A central piece of the smart grid is a smart meter that measures electricity use at your home. A smart meter enables two-way communication between your home and the utility company and gives you more control over monitoring and regulating your energy use.
The smart grid is able to help people save money on their bills because both the smart grid and smart meters are able to measure electricity usage in hourly intervals. And customers can then participate in demand response programs where they can receive alerts letting them know when to reduce electricity usage. And that way they can receive bill credits. Or they can also join dynamic pricing rates where they're encouraged to shift their usage away from the highest demand times of day to the cheaper off-peak hours, and that can help them save money. So the benefits of the smart grid, customers are able to experience fewer and shorter power outages, and it gives them more accurate and reliable energy readings.
Visit elevatenp.org to learn more about the smart grid and its benefits.
And we're back with Elevating Stories of Climate Equity. And a big thanks to our previous guests, but now we have a special guest. I'm so excited to have Angela Morrison with us. Angela is with the Chicago Jobs Council, and we've worked with her on many projects, and she's part of that coalition that passed CEJA. So the success and the achievement is hers as well. Angela, thanks for coming back. Well, wait, we worked together, but not on this show, right? We worked together in another conversation. Tell us about your work at the Chicago Jobs Council and what inspires you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sylvia. It's great to be with you this evening. The mission of the Jobs Council, I'll just share that, is to help people move out of poverty and employment. And we know that employment is just one part of a pathway out of poverty. But we really believe that people, everyone that seeks employment, no matter where they're at or where they're starting from, should have access and the opportunity to employment that meets their needs. So we approach our work really through two ways: training workforce organizations that work directly with those job seekers, and then also advocating for policy changes, things like CEJA that really break down those systemic and structural barriers to employment. So our work really happens at that intersection of policy and practice.
I love that. And that ability to have employment is life-changing and can move people towards generational wealth and out of generational challenge. So I commend you for the work that you do. And this is the work come to life. So can you talk about your policy and frontline work and what CEJA means to the Chicago Jobs Council?
So our name is somewhat of a misnomer. So the Job Council doesn't really work. We don't work directly with job seekers. We're a member-based organization. And we found that many of the staff people that work at those organizations come from the same community and have had or may have experienced some of those same challenges as the people that we're advocating for. Our frontline work really happens through our Frontline Focused Training Institute and that training team. And they provide interactive courses to give in workforce development, to give the practitioners the tools, best practices, and current trends for them to work with the job seekers that they are serving.
So it's train the trainer.
Yes. So train the people who are providing the services to the job seekers. And many of these organizations are in the community. And then our policy work really happens through advancing new policy, things like CEJA and the legislative process, but also through administrative advocacy, which is now something that the coalition, the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, is really shifting towards doing. And that can best, and that's through administrative advocacy. And that can best be described as like seeking to influence the rules that government agencies will use to implement new legislation, new laws.
Wow, and that's an important lesson, again, for the audience at home. You're a Black woman seeking to influence the rules that impact people. That kind of representation means a lot because it's life experience, right? Mm-hmm. What got you involved in community engagement?
So I'll just talk a little bit about my role at the Jobs Council, and that was really a focus and help connect our work and our policy priorities to our members, to organization and to decision makers. So those state agencies and funders that are funding this type of change. And whenever possible, to also connect to people with lived experience, which was a critical piece in helping to advance CEJA. So we really want our work at the Jobs Council to be informed by different and various stakeholders. But I've also worked at organizations that do workforce development, working with job seekers and in those communities that are directly impacted. I've lived and experienced some of the challenges as the people in the communities that we're advocating for. And then I would also add, and most importantly to me, is that I'm a person of color. And I'm a woman. So those are the voices and concerns that resonate with me every day. And those are I think I bring them with me when I show up and do the work.
It's not theoretical to you.
No.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I had my first road trip to Mississippi and met some folks who were at a school that had been segregated until 1975, like their senior year. And the groups got together, Black and white, and were talking about their experience. And it was the first time in 50 years this year that they connected. And there's a point to this story that relates to what you just said about your lived experience. One of the women, as she was leaving, said to me, you know, she was a white woman, we just didn't know. We didn't know how hard it was. And I said, well, Black kids always have to know. You know, our families teach us, we walk through the world and we know these things. And then one of her classmates said, oh, I knew how hard it was for the students, and I knew how much was taken away from them. So it's just interesting, the different perspectives, the allies that do seek to know and to be informed, and to help, and people who can say, well, we just didn't know. So in your work, your life experiences is really informing your ability to thrive. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I think definitely so. And it's really being connected. You know, I still live in the communities. I still, you know, talk to colleagues and work with people who are servicing the job seekers and hearing the stories. And that's really a way that we do our work as CJC. We at the Jobs Council, there's a couple different CJCs. But I think that is really how we want to do our work and have done our work, that we really want to hear what's happening on the ground, for lack of a better term, but really what's happening in the communities and with the people. And that when legislation passes like CEJA, when funding comes down to make these types of investment, is it really reaching its intended goal and the people and the community? So I think that's really important. And I'm glad to be at an organization that really focuses on that.
That's really helpful and thoughtful. And just how has CEJA, it's still new, but how has it helped navigate the space in your community? And what does it mean?
Sure. Thanks for that question. So in terms of community, I think I'm going to refer to through the stakeholders that we engage through our work at the Jobs Council. So we were really energized by CEJA's intentional effort to center equity throughout the bill. And my colleague and your partner at Elevate, Delmar, spoke about that. I mean, it was sprinkled and very intentionally throughout the bill. And at my organization at the Jobs Council, we were really laser focused on the workforce development components of the bill, but the connection throughout all the various components and areas of the bill were really all centered on equity. So we wanted to bring that awareness of what was within CEJA to those organizations that would be doing this work and standing up the programs and in those communities. So we really wanted to have a conversation with them and highlight that intentionality also with the folks that would be making these decisions, because that is another area where we intersect at CJC, speaking with those state agencies and government agencies about what was happening and that this was really an equitable bill. I mean, within the state, at that time, there were many state and local agencies discussing equity very intentionally. I mean, they were seeking and using data to like figure out where gaps and disparities exist. So while it was quite overdue in advancing CEJA and the timeline to address climate change, I think it just aligned so well that it was really, it was like a perfect, I won't say storm, but it was perfect timing to advance it with all the discussions that were happening.
Well, it feels that way now because when we started and it's a fact now, but when we started this segment, I mentioned that you and I had worked together before and I had a senior moment. Wait, was it this show? But we had done a town hall discussion about the possibility of the bill. Steve Bynum from WBEZ was the moderator, and you were an outstanding guest. Talk a little bit about how long it's taken to reach this point and some of the stops or processes along the way, just from your perspective.
Yes. So the coalition, this was actually my first time working with a coalition that was this diverse and this big. I mean, a statewide coalition, a lot of support, a lot of voices, and very, just the respect and the partnership and the collaboration that went through it, and thoughtfulness about if there was one voice or one organization that had a concern, that was respected and that they were heard. And you know, there were challenges throughout, because at the same time that our coalition was trying to advance CEJA, there were competing bills down in Springfield that had, you know, some equitable components to them, but were not as intentional or thoughtful about centering communities that had been disinvested in and disenfranchised and left behind. So there were many times when we thought we had the bill right at the finish line, and then in the 11th hour, we didn't make it, but we didn't, you know, the coalition partners and our leaders, those like Delmar, kept us inspired and kept us, you know, focused on who we were advocating for and what this would really mean for the people in those communities, and who would be seeking out these job opportunities and these investments, not only creating jobs, but creating, you know, business opportunities for people to move from a worker to a business owner. That doesn't happen, right?
It was a long time coming, but it's so exciting to see the success and all the people that work to make it happen. And now the next job is bringing the benefits to the people that need it and deserve it. So thank you for the work that you do, for being at the table, continuing to be there. As we get ready to close, what are you looking forward to in the next months and weeks? What inspires you?
I think it is definitely bringing this full circle. You know, it's going to be educating and sharing this information with the communities and the people and the organizations that stand to see the benefits of it and could really, that we hope reap serious benefits from it and have been left behind, but also that they are informed and that they feel empowered to talk to their legislators about how they see those dollars coming into their communities and how they are advocating for the constituents that they serve. It's also going to be thinking about and working with the organizations that are looking to stand up these programs in this emerging sector and the new opportunities, and just creating connectivity for workforce development in our state, so that we're not creating a new silo. You know, this sector can, cross over into so many other areas of work, and that there is, a lot of expansion that is going on. And we really need to be intentional about that, just as we were intentional about the equity components within it.
That is so positive. And I do think, you make a great point. If you are an electrician or another kind of contractor, there's space for you in this area as well, with some additional training. So thank you so much for coming on, Angela Morrison, Chicago Jobs Council. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and glad to have you on this show.
Thank you. Nice to see you as well.
Thank you to all of our guests and everyone for joining. We hope you've gained some valuable information on CEJA, Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, and its future impact on our state and the nation and you. See you again soon. Thanks for watching.